So hello and welcome, and are you ready? This is week 5 of Zoom Flower class. So we're going to be making an arrangement in an urn, but before we get into that, let's talk about next week's flowers. So next week we're going to be making a long, low table arrangement. I've got my hands like this because we're going to be making a sausage, a moss sausage. And this is my bag of sphagnum moss, which I bought from the garden centre just after Christmas, I think. And I used it a lot in my spring flower arranging classes. And I've kept it, it's open, and I've kept it sealed up and in the bottom of my cool flower arranging cupboard. So I am quite confident that it's stayed moist, and when I come to use it next week, I might have a little think about zhuzhing it up with a little bit of fresh water. So we're going to be making these moss sausages. That's going to make a real mess on your tabletop, imagining perhaps you're having a Jubilee tea party, or you're getting ready for a family party or a wedding or something like that. So you're going to need to wrap the moss up in something. Now, because we're trying to be a little bit more environmentally friendly, it may be that you might want to recycle some of your old plastic bread bags, or you might even want to use some compostable sheets. So the easiest access I've got to compostable bags, sheets, is actually the dog poo bags. Not only are they're not just biodegradable in the sense they break down into microplastics, these are actually compostable. So I'm guessing they must be made with a potato starch. So that's what I'm planning. I'm going to lay out my sheets of dog poo bags, put my moss inside, and then roll it up. And that's why I've got a piece of string. So that's going to be the vital mechanics, is you're going to have something to bind your moss together. And to keep your tabletop clean, you need to wrap it up in something. So I would say don't stress about it. I'm trying to go plastic free, but if that's just a step too far for you, you know, an old bin bag, and as I say, a bread bag, just make sure it hasn't got perforations or holes in it. And then of course, flowers are up to you. So it could be any kind of flower. I would say probably flowers with woodier stems would work best. So all your greeneries, perhaps your roses, chrysanthemums, things like that, carnations, nothing with too flimsy a stem, because you've got to get your stem into the moss and to hold, and it may even be that you're pushing the stem through the plastic sheet, depending on how much plastic, or I shouldn't really say plastic, how much of the protective sheet you're going to have wrapping around your moss. And then flowers and greenery, up to you. I'm thinking it's going to be something quite low that sort of snakes down the table. So probably for demonstration purposes, I'll make something about this long. It's about 40 centimetres long. But of course, if you were making it for a real live party, you would be able to make it metres and metres long, or at least in short sections, and then put it together to look like it was one continuous length. So if you've got any questions about that, you're welcome to drop them into the chat. Or if you're a member of the Facebook group Flower Start World, you can ask me your questions there. And if you're not a member of the group and you're not here live, you can always leave a comment under the video and I'll come back to you, or drop me a line next time I email you. You can just hit reply and come back to me. So I'm going to get rid of these out of the way, ready for next week. And let's talk about this week's flowers. So here, I hope you can see it okay. On my laptop, I've got a very pale screen. So I've got my pale cupboards, my pale top, and my pale vase, and I can't actually see it very well in the screen. I'm looking back at myself. So I have got this urn-shaped vase. It's just a classic shape for arranging flowers in. It doesn't matter if you don't have an urn-shaped vase. You could use any container that was tall. So it could be a slimline flower bucket, or it could be your normal vase that you arrange flowers in. It will help you though if you've got quite a wide mouth to your vase, because the wider the mouth, the bigger the hole, and the more space you've got to put your flowers in. So I'm imagining something that's a bit like one of the arrangements you see in the Dutch master paintings, you know, a dark background, a very moody collection of flowers, and just really, really flower heavy. And having said that, I am barely going to use any greenery at all, but it's entirely up to you. If you've got a well-stocked garden of mature greenery, you could make this arrangement just using greenery and combining all your colours and textures. But I've decided this week to go flower heavy. So I've got some flowers over my shoulder, 2 vases of flowers, and some laid out in the box behind me. And they are the equivalent of about 2 boxes worth of my Freddy's Flowers delivery, plus a few extra stems I've just had and gathered around the house. So I've brought all my flower arrangements around the house to one place, and I'm going to reinvent them to create this beautiful arrangement. In terms of mechanics and holding everything in place in my vase, in my urn there, I've got a piece of chicken wire. So again, this is about 40 centimetres long, I don't know, 25 centimetres wide, and it's got quite a large gauge to it. If I do this, perhaps you will see how big the hole is. Because when I scrunch the wire up and put it into my vase, I'm going to scrunch the wire up. So it'll make the holes a little bit smaller. So if you have a smaller gauge wire, you don't want to be too heavy-handed with your scrunching up. And in fact, you might want to have a little bit more wire than I'm using, so you can shape it into a ball to support your flowers, but you haven't crunched it down so much that your tiny holes become even smaller. So although these holes look really big, the time I have shaped my wire, they will be a little bit smaller, but they will still allow me to slide my flower stems in. So this week it's all about going foam free, and fingers crossed, because we're going foam free, our flowers will actually last longer, because they do prefer to be in water. So let's get started. Now the first thing you need to do is to I'm going to put my wire in first and then add my water in. I'm not adding my water in first because I'm not quite sure how far I want to push the wire into the neck of my urn. And you can just imagine, if I put my water in first and then I get my ball of wire and I push it in, I'm going to have water spraying absolutely everywhere. So the thing that I do want to do is, when I shape my wire, you've got options here that you could either try and zigzag your wire into the neck of your vase. I'm not going to do that because I've got a ceramic vase and I don't want to scratch the inside of my vase any more than I need to. But if you were making this perhaps in a garden urn, I've got a beautiful rusty urn in my garden, and I could use the wire and it wouldn't matter if it scraped the insides at all. So you could, if you wanted to, sort of concertina your chicken wire up, and then you get support for your flowers right from the very base of your container up to the top. I'm going to loosely make a ball with my wire. So I've got it long ways, and then I'm going to fold it in half. I'm bending it in half. I'm not creasing to fold in half. And the cut ends from where it came off the reel, I'm going to wrap those round and sort of stitch the wire pieces together, just so it holds a little bit. And just taking care, because these are sharp ends and you don't want to go scratching yourself, but it just means it'll hold together a little bit. So now I've got something that is roughly a tube. If I wanted to, I could put my arm through it like that. And you could do the same on the other end, and you could seal up the ends. And it just gives you a little bit more control. And then from there, I am going to put it into the mouth of my vase and just, mush it down a little bit. I'm not quite sure what the technical word is. Just mush it down. But so you can see from having the holes in my wire, which are about this big, they have crunched down a little bit. And when I put my wire, just bring that in front of me so perhaps you can see it a bit clearer, I'm not pushing it all the way down into the neck of the vase. I'm imagining that when I finish, it's going to look like a Dutch master, and I want to have the support for my flowers to spill out. I don't want everything for this design to be straight up and down, but of course if you want to, that's entirely up to you. This is your chance to do your own artistic interpretation of what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to manipulate my wire and get it to sit in my container, but it's raised ever so slightly, and that just gives me the opportunity not only to put my flowers in upright, but also to get some to splay out to the sides as well. And you can see there that it's not holding at all. So, you know, I could, you know, shape the wire a bit more, perhaps it was a bit more balloon shaped rather than spherical. I could get that to sit there a little bit more comfortably. So what I am going to do is to use my pot tape to hold my my wire in place. So I've got options here. Number one, I've got this clear pot tape, which if you have it, I would suggest is a great thing to use because it'll be hidden. So with this white vase, clear pot tape, you won't see it. I've got a narrow pot tape as well, but I'm tending towards today using my wider pot tape. It's about, I think it's 1.2 centimetres wide. The narrow is 6 millimetres wide. So when I add the pot tape on here, it's going to look really unsightly because you're going to end up with one or two, depending on how bits of tape I use, of these little lines across the top. And I'm doing that for teaching purposes, so you can see that I've taped my mechanics in place. And when you come to do this, you may well, if you've got the clear tape, I would say use the clear tape. But whatever you do, if you have used the dark tape, you just need to bear in mind where your little fingers of tape are. So I'm imagining with my urn, it's got these two handles at the side. I'm imagining that the two handles are very conventional. I'm going to have the handles of my finished arrangements off to the side. So when I come to tape, it might actually make more sense if I turned the vase on its side, twisted it round, and put the tape on the sides where the handles are, so that when I rotate it back, your view is of an uninterrupted piece of vase, and I won't have to stress quite so much about putting my tape in place. I could put the tape right over the top, but I quite like doing this, reeling off quite a long bit. And if you can, if you've got the patience and perseverance for you, I sort of thread it through the middle. And then pulling it down, a bit like when you use flower foam, you sort of want the tape to bite into the foam. I'm wanting it to bite into the chicken wire, so you can see how ugly that is. I'm having one here and one there. If you could just put one through the middle and hope that it holds, but I think because I'm going to overstuff this with flowers. That's the grand plan. And I don't want to be so mean with my tape that I then discover that everything's pinging off. So I'm going to do two parallel lines. So thread that through there, catch it with my fingers, and pull it down like that. So mechanics done. You can see how awful that looks. If you had no other option but the thick tape, my advice would be put it to the sides where the handles are, and then just really finesse your workmanship. So it may be that you either trim them both off to the same length so they look more intentional, and if you find that your tape is pinging up for any reason, you could always put another extra bit of tape along here to sort of anchor it in place. I tend to find if I feel I need to anchor it, to give it real solidity, what I often do is take my tape all the way around the top of the vase and bring it back, and then it looks like I have got a vase that looks beautiful and elegant, but just happens to have a dark line going continuously around. And sometimes by adding more tape, it can look more purposeful and neater. You want your eyes drawn to the flowers, not to the ugly tape. So at this point, the mechanics are done. I can then add in my water. So here goes. I have a cloth to the side, so hopefully I won't spill. I've gone quite high with my water, it's about up to here. So when I come to move this to put it where I want to have my flowers arranged, I'm going to have to be quite careful in the sense that, picking my vase up with two hands, and ironically making sure I've got sensible shoes on and not flipping around in my flip-flops, because you want to walk with confidence as you move this from your kitchen table to wherever you're planning to display your flowers. So as I said, I'm not going to be using any greenery. So To get the shape of my arrangement, I'm going to use some alstroemeria, and the alstroemeria I'm using is really full bloom. It's probably, it's not in its last legs, but it's a good 3/4 away through its vase life, and I'm going to put those in first of all. One question I know has cropped up in some messages I had is how tall your vase should be, and then how high your arrangement should be. So I'm not going to be prescriptive about how tall your vase should be or how big your arrangement would be. I want you to enjoy the process of arranging your flowers without getting too het up on the rules. But if you do like a rule and you want to have a bit of a guide, a bit of a stepping stone to something, if you think about your arrangement in thirds, you either want 2/3 of your vase and 1/3 in flowers, or that your vase becomes the third and then your flowers could come up higher. So that, and that's sort of an accepted way of thinking about proportion. But my key concern is that number one, I'm going to use a vase I've already got. Number two, I'm not going to be measuring my flowers to see how tall they are. And number three, the higher you come up, the more unstable everything's going to become. So I'm thinking about this from a practicality point of view. I want, a nice weighted vase that isn't going to topple over, and then I'm going to not come up too tall because I don't want everything shaking and moving around. I am going to be arranging a more compact arrangement. There may well be things that fly off either side, but it's going to be quite a compact look. But of course, you are arranging your own flowers. You know exactly where your flowers are going to go. You know what your vase is like. You know how tall and your plant material is. And you'll need to make these decisions as you go along. Or it may be that you want to go free flow and you don't actually know what you're going to be making until it actually happens in front of you. So I would just go with the flow. And as long as your flowers are in water, you keep them topped up with water and you've got them somewhere reasonably cool, everything will be fine. Don't stress about it too much. So let's get on with me just starting to cover up the chicken wire mechanics there with my alstroemeria. So here we go, a little pinky white alstroemeria. I will still measure up against my container, bearing in mind as well that the bottom of my water line isn't the base of the container because that's the little stand. I have to sort of measure up to the bottom here, but not all your stems need to reach the bottom of the container as long as they're in water, and that's why I've come up quite high with water. So in theory, I bet I could probably put I've got quite long alstroemeria here. I could probably put one of those little branchlets in there and it would still be in water and still do its job. But I don't want to be putting flowers in one at a time. I'm going to be big, I'm going to be bold and just be exuberant. So often I think with our flowers, we don't really want to spend money. We want everything to be value for money, but sometimes it's just nice to splurge and be really abundant. So I'm going to eye that up. I'm going to take with the alstroemeria. My alstroemeria is a little bit old. The leaves aren't looking great, but I'm going to take them all off because I do not need leaves falling off into my container, and just the odd leaf somewhere isn't going to show. It's going to have no decorative effect. So let's get those in like that. It's quite tall. Perhaps I could go even shorter with the next one. So taking off those yellowing leaves, let's go bold. But I need to be careful here because my material is branched. So I could possibly scrunch the branches together to slide that into one of the holes left by my chicken wire, but I don't want to be so heavy-handed that I've scrunched the stems and they're not going to fit in. But you can do what you want with the flowers. You be the boss. So I think that probably was a little bit high at the front, but we'll fiddle with that later. So what I'm doing here is a cut and plonk just to get the shape really. That's bothering me, that one. I'm going to go for imagining a swimming hat with lots of flowers all over it, just to bulk out and give me somewhere to start. You have to start with your flowers. So you've got to put a flower in first, and this is a good one to put in. It's lovely and branched, and you could imagine that if you had no other flowers but alstroemeria, they would look lovely massed together like this. So this is just my equivalent of a foliage arrangement. It looks the same all the way around. Now, you will need to think about where the front of your arrangement is and keep that in mind, especially if you're using a turntable like I am, that you don't want to be spinning your flowers round and then your sort of focal area is sort of doing a spiral around your vase. So, you know, I'm remembering that my handles come sideways and that piece there, I'm going to turn that round. That bit's slightly higher at the back. My front is the bare bit at the front. So I will put the flowers in so I can see them, but I will spin them round so that you can see them as I go. So I'm just looking at the goodies I've got in. So I'm going to then put in my focal flowers, my biggest flowers. I have got some bloom chrysanthemums and some alliums that you can see behind me there. So I want to get those in first. And what I'm going to do is to cluster them together for maximum effect. I'm not going to put one over here, one over here, one over here. I'm going to group them together. Not so close together though that they look like they're just one big flower. I want to see they're 3 flowers, but I want them grouped for maximum impact. So these are a lovely, they've sort of got a bit of a vintage tinge to them. They're a very pale pink with a little bit of a greenish tip to the ends of them. So they will look, and again, measuring up against my flowers. Now, if you had more room, you could have to pull your vase to the edge of the table and then let your stems fall down the table, but I'm just guesstimating here. So I've cut it short and then I can put my first flower in. Can you see from the side there? I've got it so it's resting on the neck of the container. So back to me. So all the time you're just sort of swinging around, bringing it back, having a look. So start to wiggle down. So that one's gone in a little bit higher there. And then I'll either come with the next one, probably down there. I've created a little triangle. So you don't have to work in 3s. If you've got 2 flowers, you work in 2s. And in fact, if you're using flowers in the supermarket, this is a really great arrangement to do when you've got those bunches that are like one of everything. So you're not actually making patterns. We just want the arrangement to look balanced overall. So I've come in with my group of 3 bloom chrysanthemums first of all. So that gives me a real sort of solidity to the arrangement, and you start to sort of just think, yes. And then my Alströmeria is taking a back seat now. It really is fulfilling the role of being greenery. So it's hidden, it's there, but it's hidden a little bit. So talking about having one of everything, I've then got a mixed bunch here that have pretty much one of everything. I have got 2 stocks. One is a creamy colour, one is white. They were from a gift of flowers from a friend at the weekend. I've got some Alströmeria, which were left over, I think, from a Freddy's Flowers box a week or so ago. One stem of a really delicate chrysanthemum. Looks a bit like the feverfew or chamomile flower, and then some, I said they were stocks, phlox. I think this must be phlox then. And again, this is about a week old. It came in my Freddy's Flowers delivery about a week ago. Some of the leaves are starting to turn over, so because I don't need the greenery to fill out, I can just make sure I pinch off anything that just looks like the colours going over, in order that your eye is attracted to the beautiful bits of your arrangement and not the bits that look a little bit, old. So 2 stocks here. So I'm not going to go one either side because it's going to make it look like it's got ears. I will, when I put them in, have one a little higher and one a little lower. So if I do that, and again, measuring up to get the idea of where I'm going with this, and then recut the stems, I know if I put them together into my arrangement, they will be, a pair, but they'll be, slightly different heights. So they just start to fill out a little bit. And then I'll do the same with my phlox. It's got a lovely textural detail. The little buds come into flower and then they do fall off again. So you may well have a scattering of petals here. So I've got, again, I'm coming back to the front to me, anchoring the front to me, having a look, and then cutting them at slightly different heights because I'm going to put them in as a pair So it sort of solidifies them, and you get to see them instead of them being lost. And I've mirrored the position of the stalks on this side with the phlox on the other side, and then start to fill out again. So it's quite nice when you're doing a vase arrangement like this, is to mix your forms, the shape of the flower. So I've got my rounded forms at the front, and then these spike or line forms as well. It just mixes it up a little bit so it doesn't look too samey. You need to think about your flower arrangements as being something at the buffet. Does it look, although we're not going to eat our flower arrangements, is it going to be a visual feast for your eyes? So I've ended up with one Lisianthus on a stem on its own. So I might actually, to show it off, I might bring that up in the middle just so you can see it. And then the Lisianthus that's on the stem here, I'm going to cut those right down, and then they can be underneath. So again, I'm grouping the materials together so that they all talk to each other, like with like, are having a conversation. And then with my carnations in here, it's quite a compact carnation, it's a chrysanthemum. It's quite a compact form, and sometimes I might go in and cut out the top and then cut out the bottom, but it's not going to work here because I'll end up with the top flowers that are just too small. So I'm going to put this in as one long piece, and I might, as there's just one of them, go in towards the back there. I'm going to make that a tiny bit shorter. Now you'll see here that as I start to take the flowers out, once you've got the flowers in, you can slide them in and out, but it's not as easy to do as if you were just arranging flowers in water. So it comes to a stage where you do have to be quite committed, because you don't want to then catch your flower on the way out on that curled up bit of wire, or dislodge the flowers that you've already put in, and where you are happy with their placement. So I'm going to have that one down, yes, a little bit lower. So it just sinks down a little bit at the back, and it's gone towards the back. I am starting to create a little bit of depth. So bearing in mind that's the front, and my stocks and my phlox went in here, and my chrysanthemum went in there. So I'm thinking about the depth that's being created in my vase. So I will just have a little clean away here. I'm saving my gyp for later. I'm not sure about putting that in, so I'll slide my waste to the side. And then I've got some more colourful flowers. Let me bring those in. So those marvellous alliums. I've got some more stocks, the purple. So I've gone for my the nude pinks, and now I'm going to contrast those with a slightly more, a flower with more oomph and definition. And do I want to put my purple status in? I'm not quite sure, but I'll get it out of the vase. So I have got a very limited amount of greenery. I've got 3 stems of hard ruscus and 3 stems of eucalyptus, but I'm not sure I want to use those. So again, I turn around my vase. I have a look. So I had my stocks in this side, and now I'm thinking what to do with these 3 stocks. Now the first thing I can do before I even put the stocks in, these stocks are just a few days old, and they do change over time. So I always think about these leaves as being a little bit like gem lettuce, but sadly, like gem lettuce, they don't stay crisp and green, and they do tend to go a bit yellowy and discoloured quite early on in the process, so I'm going to take those off. And then also the flowers, you've got the full blooms here and then the buds at the top, but these little bits at the bottom, I'm not sure the camera's picking up on that, they don't look happy at all. They have really gone over. So you can either pinch those off with your fingers or trim them off with your scissors. So I am just taking off the dead flowers from the bottom. It makes the flower stem look nicer, but also I believe it then encourages the flowers to open higher up the stem. So I'm putting it into my vase here. Just remembering as well, when I come to cut, I'm not cutting to the bottom, I'm cutting up here, because the water reservoir is there. But these are quite striking. That's gone in quite high at the top. Same here, the leaves, not looking good at all. I don't want them, I don't need them to fill out my vase because the vase is quite full. And of course, I haven't really got any space amongst all that chicken wire to get them in. So sometimes I pull off these leaves, or I should say, I'm not really pulling off the flowers. I'm pinching them with between my nails. You don't want to pull and rip, because you will be, you'll create a wound in your stem and your flowers might not last so long. So here, I'll wiggle down to put those in. So it's your chicken wire soon sort of fills up. So circling that in. So I've got 2 in at the top there. And then I'm going to come in on the other side. And at this stage, you know, I don't really know where to put the next flower. So what I'm doing, I'm reading my flowers, I'm reading my vase. Where do I want it to go? Where is there a gap? And there's nothing wrong with, you know, holding it up and thinking, I want it there, I want it there, I don't want it there. Part of the reason I'm hesitant about putting a shorter one in is because I'm trying to create a sort of massed arrangement, and I don't necessarily want to see that there's a line in it, like we would for a conventional flower arrangement if we were doing a line arrangement. So I'm trying almost to, my brain wants to do one thing, I'm thinking, no, I'm going to do this differently today. I'm going to take it out to the other side. So here goes, measure, and then off to the side. So what I'm doing here is twisting, just sort of corkscrewing, I suppose, to get the flower down. So I've got the 2 purple at the top and then this purple off at the side as well. So it's just creating, you know, my flowers are light in area by colour, but I'm wanting to create a real, well, heaviness seems the wrong word to use, but, you know, something nice and solid. And then I'm going to come in, you know, this absolute luxury with my alliums. So which ones do I want to use first? So normally we'd use the biggest flower in the centre of the arrangement and the smallest flower outside edge. And you've got to look at your flowers and think, well, you know, are they all the same size? I think this one's the biggest. I'm quite like this one. It's got like a kink to the head. And actually this one has a little bit of a kink. So I'm imagining when I put them in my vase, I might do them something like that. So let's get the first flower in. So I've got this really, really long stem. I'm going to cut it about in half. And then I can see a gap just here. Now, what do you think about this? As I've put it in, can you see how far it's sticking out? Again, it's given me depth in my vase. And of course, I'm not going to be looking at it at that sort of acute angle from the side. But when I twist it round to the front, it just gives that layer to your arrangement. And if I pushed it in any further, it then starts to join up with the 2 chrysanthemums there. So I'm trying to create this sort of layer on a layer. It's almost as if the allium is shielding or protecting the chrysanthemums underneath. And it's just this thing about recession, really. Now, where the chrysanthemums looks as if they are a focal flower, but they went in first, they've actually, because they're shorter, they're now sort of recessed underneath the allium. And then I want to take advantage of the little kinky bits, so I'm going to go in a little bit taller than this. So that's coming in at the back. Let's see if I can wiggle that down. I can feel that I'm starting to run out of space in my a bit better. Can you see the stem coming up there? A little bit of a gap, but what I'm going to do, that stem looks very stark to me, but it has got the stalk in front of it. So what I've just done there is I've just manipulated the stalk a little bit so it lies in front of the allium stem, so it's not quite so stark. So it was sort of like that before, and I've just sort of layered it up like that. So it doesn't look like someone's done a beautiful arrangement and then got a black marker and just gone and drawn a line down the middle of it. So I can see that we've got a comment in the chat. I think I'm going to have to come back to it because I'm not sure my glasses can help me see that. So bear with me and I will come back to you when we do the group discussion at the end. So I've come off at the other side there. So the 3 alliums are off to the side. My 3 chrysanthemums were together. So it's like making little groupings of people. It's almost imagining yourself going to, you know, your Saturday street market, and everybody isn't an individual. You'll find people coming together and mingling and having a chat and catching up, and that's exactly what my flowers are doing here. And then, do I need my my statice? Part of the reason I'm hesitant about my statice is because it is quite a vibrant purple, and I'm not entirely sure whether it's going to go with my blush colours. So I'll put a few pieces in. I'm putting this in like a filler flower. And what I am doing when I place it into my container, it's sort of got this sort of long lozenge shape, and I always like to put it in as if that's flowing out, a little bit like when you've got freesias. I always think they've got a direction on them. I'm trying to work with a direction. In fact, I might cut that one off, and it sort of acts more like a little, you know, it's almost like an arrow pointing into the arrangement. So if I show you there and there, that is what I mean. It's sort of got the width of the flower close to the vase and the tip coming further away. So actually I think the contrast is rather good there, that it's giving me, nothing's too pale. I'm getting a lovely sort of depth and character to it. So when we see these Dutch master arrangements, when we, you know, looking at art galleries, I always tend to think about being quite wintry arrangements and autumn time and sort of the bounty of late summer. So this is definitely a summertime arrangement just because of the choice of colours. It's the season that we're in at the moment. So I can fill in with those. Oops, that one's the wrong way around. Make sure it does ping outwards. And then, of course, you could add more and more flowers in. I'm still slightly disconcerted by that tall stem there. So I'm going to see whether I can fix that by putting a bit more of the statice in, just to try and hide that stem, because that's where my handles are at the side. And then we come back and review. I have got a few more stems. I have got some gyp. Do I want to put these flowers in? Well, the thing to do is to have a go. And if you don't want to commit to putting them in your vase, hold them up behind the vase so you can see them first of all. Just have a little bit of a look. That's too long, shorter. Making sure, of course, that your flowers are in water. Sounds obvious, but you don't want to get so carried away with creating a beautiful arrangement that looks good in front of you and then discover that your flowers are drooping because you haven't pushed them down quite far enough. So that's always a good idea, is to put lots of water in here. And what I tend to do is to put my fingers over the edge after a few days. And if I can't feel the water on my fingertip as it goes into the water, I know that it's time to add in more. So the beauty of arranging is you can titivate and have a lovely look at it. And what I always like to do as well is to come back to the arrangement when I think I've finished it, and then have a look and put in the last few stems. So if I decide that this needs more stems, I have actually got some Solidago, which was going to be my other alternative for adding in the greenery element. I think, though, the colour is going to be too brash. So I have got some more white chrysanthemums, which may or may not get added in. And I've also got some Michaelmas daisies as well. And they were a gift. I think there must have been some florist flowers, which were a gift from a friend. So if I stand that back, I'm probably going to finish the arrangement there. And then I will, as you're working along with me in the Make and Create session in the class, I will have a really good look. So I'll probably actually have it up against my cupboard doors here and actually come behind the camera just to, get a bit of distance so I can actually see it front on. So I hope that has inspired you to make your own summertime arrangement in a very traditional country house style, Dutch kind of style. And you can see in terms of the flowers, I haven't stuck to the rules, but I think that's the joy of flower arranging. I probably overall got from the top of my flower is probably a 50%, it's 50-50 probably overall, 50% flowers and 50% vase. But what are rules if not to be broken?
So I'm going to sign off now for those of you who are watching on record, and those of you who are staying around to have a chat and make and create. I will be available to answer all your questions live.